I know how to disappear in a room full of people. I learned that skill young, probably around the time my stepmother made it clear that my presence at family dinners was more of an inconvenience than anything else. Just sit small. Eat quietly. Don't ask for seconds. Don't laugh too loud. My dad never corrected her. He'd just refill his wine glass and look somewhere past my shoulder like I was a smudge on the wall he'd stopped noticing. So when my grandmother pressed a yellowed envelope into my hands at my own wedding reception and whispered, "Don't open this in front of your father," I did what I always did. I slipped it into my clutch, smiled, and said nothing. I should have known my stepmother was watching. The reception was at a vineyard outside Charlottesville. My husband Elliot's family had connections there, and honestly, it was the most beautiful place I'd ever stood in my life. String lights, late June heat that had finally softened into something bearable by 7 o'clock, the smell of cut grass and whatever the caterers had going on with the herb butter. I kept thinking, this is mine. This moment is actually mine. Nobody can ruin this. I was wrong about that last part. My grandmother, my dad's mother, the one who raised him before he decided her version of love was too inconvenient, had flown in from Tucson. She was 78 and moved slowly now, but her eyes were exactly the same as I remembered from childhood. Sharp, patient. She'd always looked at me like she was keeping track of something. She found me between the salad course and the entree, near the edge of the tent where it was quieter. "Your grandfather set something up for you," she said, pressing the envelope flat against my palm. "A long time ago, before he passed, he made me promise to give it to you on your wedding day." My grandfather had died when I was 11. I barely remembered him. A tall man with rough hands who smelled like cedar and always kept butterscotch candies in his shirt pocket. But I remembered that he liked me, that he'd look at me at Sunday dinners and say, "There she is," like my showing up was the best part of his week. "What is it?" I asked. "A key," she said, "and a letter. Read the letter first." "Alone." I nodded and tucked it back into my clutch. I didn't get to keep it there long. My dad appeared from nowhere, or maybe from the bar, which was more likely, and he had that particular energy he got when he'd had 2 drinks and was feeling generous with himself. Broad smile, hand on my shoulder, a little too heavy. "What'd she give you?" "Just a card," I said. He held out his hand. "Let me see." I don't know why I gave it to him. 27 years of conditioning, maybe. The instinct to hand things over before he got louder about it. I gave him the envelope. He opened it right there, didn't ask, didn't hesitate. Just tore the flap and pulled out the folded letter and the small brass key taped to the bottom corner. I watched his face as he read. The generous smile went somewhere else. Something moved behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. He folded the letter back up slowly. "Huh," he said. "Dad, that was addressed to me. It's a safe deposit box key." He turned it over in his fingers. "Old one. Your grandfather's bank closed years ago. This thing is probably worthless." "Can I have it back?" He looked at the key for another second, then dropped it into his jacket pocket. "I'll look into it," he said. "Don't worry about it tonight. It's your wedding." He walked away. My grandmother had been watching from 6 feet back. I saw her face, and I knew she'd seen exactly what happened, and she wasn't surprised. I went to find Elliot. He was talking to his college roommate near the bar, and when he saw my expression, he excused himself immediately. That's the thing about Elliot. He reads me like large print text. He took my hand and pulled me around the side of the tent. "He took it," I said. "Took what?" I told him. All of it, the envelope, the key, my grandmother's instructions, my dad folding the letter and pocketing everything like it belonged to him. Elliot was quiet for a moment. He has this quality I've always respected, where his anger doesn't make noise right away. It just settles into him and gets very still. "Did you see what the letter said?" "No." He read it before I could. "Okay." He squeezed my hand once. "We'll figure it out. Tonight is still yours. We'll figure it out tomorrow." I spent the rest of my wedding reception being happy in a slightly cracked way, like a window that's been hit but hasn't fallen apart yet. My grandmother found me again near the end of the night. He took it, I said. I know. She didn't look surprised, just tired. I should have mailed it to you. I thought doing it in person would feel more like your grandfather intended. She paused. There's a letter on file with the bank, too. Your name is on the account. Your grandfather made sure of that. Which bank? She wrote a name on a cocktail napkin. First Federal Trust, one of those smaller, regional banks that had been absorbed by a larger one years ago, but apparently the accounts transferred. The branch nearest to me was in Richmond. I held the cocktail napkin the way I should have held that envelope. 2 weeks later, Elliot and I were back from our honeymoon in Portugal, and I hadn't heard a word from my dad. No mention of the key. No, I looked into it. Nothing. Which told me everything. I drove to the Richmond branch of First Federal Trust on a Tuesday afternoon. I brought my marriage certificate, my ID, and a copy of my birth certificate. My grandmother had told me my name was on the account as a named beneficiary, and I wanted to be prepared. The branch manager was a woman named Carol, who looked like someone who had handled complicated family situations before and was not easily rattled. I explained what I needed. She typed for a while. Then she stopped typing. She looked up at me. "Can you give me 1 moment?" she said, and her voice had gone very careful. She went into a back office. She was gone for almost 10 minutes. I sat in the chair across from her desk and looked at the framed photo of her kids on the wall and tried not to think too hard. When she came back, she had a folder and a man I assumed was her supervisor. He introduced himself, sat down, and folded his hands on the desk. "Miss," he paused, using my married name. "The account your grandfather established is still active. He opened it in 1984 and named you as the sole beneficiary upon your marriage or your 25th birthday, whichever came later." I said, "Okay." There's also a restricted access flag on the account. Someone attempted to access it approximately 11 days ago with a key. My stomach dropped. They were denied because the account requires identity verification from the named beneficiary, you, in person, but the attempt was logged. 11 days ago, 3 days after my wedding. "How much is in the account?" I asked. Carol looked at her supervisor. He nodded slightly. "The account was opened with a principal amount," he said, "and your grandfather set it up as a self-directed investment trust. Over 40 years, the holdings, primarily dividend reinvesting index funds and some early tech sector positions, have appreciated considerably." He turned the folder so I could see the number. I don't know what my face did. I remember the fluorescent light above me felt very bright. The balance was just under $4 million. $4 million that my grandfather had quietly, patiently grown since 1984 and left entirely to me and never told anyone except my grandmother, and my father had just spent 11 days trying to get his hands on it. I drove home in a state that I can only describe as very loud silence. I didn't call anyone. I just drove. Elliot was working from home when I got there. He took one look at me, closed his laptop, and said, "Tell me." I told him. He was quiet for a long time. "He tried to access it," Elliot finally said. "That's not just taking a key at a wedding. That's attempted fraud." I know. The bank has a record of it. I know. So what do you want to do? That was the thing. I'd spent the drive home asking myself the same question. I could just claim the account. It was mine, my name was on it, my grandfather had made it legally airtight, and simply walk away. Never tell my dad what I'd found. Let him wonder. Or, "My dad is supposed to give a toast at my cousin Vivienne's graduation party," I said. "Next month, his whole side of the family will be there, about 60 people." Elliot looked at me for a long moment. "What kind of toast?" he asked. "The kind where he positions himself as the family patriarch who raised me basically alone after my mom left." I paused. "He does it at every big event. Big speech about sacrifice and legacy." I watched Elliot's face work through it. "What do you need from me?" he asked. I needed 3 things. First, I went back to the bank and worked with Carol and her supervisor to formally claim the account. Full identity verification, legal documentation, everything by the book. My grandfather's attorney, a man in his 80s who had been holding a sealed letter for years, waiting for exactly this moment, sent the transfer paperwork within 48 hours. He'd known. He'd been waiting. My grandfather had set up a contingency. If anyone attempted unauthorized access, the attorney was to be notified automatically. The attorney's letter to me was 2 pages. The second page was a note from my grandfather, written in 1991, when I was 3 years old, that he'd apparently updated several times until he died. The last update was from the year before he passed. He wrote, "I don't know what your life has looked like by the time you read this. I hope it's been mostly good. I know your father. I love him. But I know him. This money is for you, not for his ideas about you, not for his plans. For you. Use it to build something that can't be taken." I had to sit in my car in the parking lot for a while after I read that. Second, I contacted an attorney of my own, a friend of Elliot's from law school who specialized in estate law and financial fraud. She reviewed the bank's access logs. My dad had shown up with the key 11 days after the wedding and told the teller that he was acting on behalf of his recently married daughter who was on her honeymoon and had asked him to check on an inherited account. He'd given them my name, my date of birth, my social security number. He had my social security number. It took a beat for that to land fully. He hadn't just grabbed an envelope of opportunity. He'd done this deliberately. He'd known my grandfather had set something up, maybe guessed, maybe was told at some point, and when that key appeared, he'd been ready. Elliot's friend filed a report with the Virginia Attorney General's office. The bank had already flagged it. Wills were turning that I had not turned myself, which was a strange comfort. Third, I called my grandmother. She answered on the second ring, and when I told her what I'd found, the balance, the attempted access, the attorney's letter, she was quiet for a moment. Then, she said, "Your grandfather would have been glad." "Did Dad ever ask you about it? About what Grandpa set up for me?" A pause. "Once. About 6 years ago. I told him I didn't know what he was talking about." "Did he believe you?" "No," she said, "but he didn't push. He was waiting, I think. Waiting to see what surfaced." After I hung up, I sat with that for a long time. 6 years. He'd been waiting for 6 years. And when my grandmother handed me that envelope at my own wedding, he'd seen his window and taken it. Vivienne's graduation party was a Saturday afternoon thing at my aunt and uncle's house in McLean. Big backyard, a tent, the kind of spread that signals someone ordered from a real caterer and not just Costco. My dad's whole side of the family, plus Vivienne's friends from Georgetown, plus neighbors, maybe 65 people. Elliot drove. I was wearing a green dress I'd bought specifically because it was the color my grandmother always said made me look like I knew something. She was there when we arrived, already seated near the back of the tent in a cushioned chair my aunt had set out for her. My dad was near the bar. Of course, he saw me come in and did his usual thing, the wide open-armed greeting, the "there's my girl," the performance of warmth. I hugged him back and smiled. "Haven't heard from you since the wedding," I said. "Ah, you two were traveling. I didn't want to intrude." He squeezed my shoulder. "We'll have you both for dinner soon, catch up properly." "Absolutely," I said. Elliot shook his hand, smiled, said nothing extra. My aunt's neighbor was a recently retired federal prosecutor. She'd mentioned this at Thanksgiving 3 years ago, and I had filed it away the way you file things you think might matter someday. I'd confirmed she was on the guest list. I'd also, through Elliot's attorney friend, coordinated with the AGO contact who had been in touch with local authorities about the open fraud investigation and was aware of where I'd be that afternoon. I hadn't told my dad any of this. The party went the way these parties go. Vivienne opened cards. Someone gave a speech about potential and bright futures. The food was good. The Chardonnay was cold. My dad circulated with the ease of someone who genuinely enjoys a crowd, and I watched him and thought about how long I had watched him from the edges of rooms, trying to take up less space. Not today. He got up to give his toast around 3:30, tapped his glass. The tent quieted. I'll give him this, he's a compelling speaker. He knows how to build a room. He talked about Vivienne with real warmth, talked about the family, and then, as I knew he would, he pivoted. To himself, to legacy, to what it meant to raise children with values, to sacrifice for family, to pass something down. He looked at me when he said that last part. Some things you pass down quietly, he said, voice going soft and significant. Some investments you make in people, and you don't always know when you'll see the return, but that's what family is. I stood up. I don't know exactly what I looked like. I know what I felt like that note my grandfather had written, like the $4 million number on the folder Carol had turned toward me, like 32 years of taking up less space, burning down to one clear, calm point. That's a beautiful thought, I said. Especially from someone who drove to a bank in Richmond 11 days after my wedding and tried to access an account that my grandfather left entirely to me. The tent went very quiet. My dad's face did something I'd never seen it do. The performance fell. Just for a second, before he tried to get it back. This isn't, he started. The bank has it on record, I said. You gave them my name, my date of birth, and my social security number. You told them I'd sent you. I was in Portugal. Someone in the back made a small sound. The Virginia Attorney General's office has the fraud report. Your grandfather's estate attorney has been notified. I paused. I'm not doing this to embarrass you. I'm doing this because I want you to know, in front of the people you perform for, that I know exactly what you did. Elliot was standing now too, not saying anything, just present. My dad looked at the room, looked at my grandmother who was sitting very still with her hands folded in her lap, watching him with the patient expression I recognized from a lifetime of her watching and waiting. He set down his champagne glass. I think we should talk about this privately, he said. His voice had changed. The warmth was gone. What was left was something flat and careful. The time for private conversations was before you tried to steal from me, I said. I hope you enjoy the party. I sat back down. Elliot put his hand over mine under the table. The rest of the afternoon moved around us like weather. My aunt came over and said something low and distressed to my dad. My cousin Vivienne, to her enormous credit, came and hugged me and said I had no idea. I'm so sorry. My dad left within 20 minutes. His wife followed, heels clicking fast across the flagstone. My grandmother stayed until the end. When the tent was mostly empty and the caterers were clearing plates, she came and sat next to me. How do you feel? She asked. I thought about it. Like I finally got to stop being small, I said. She nodded like that was exactly the right answer. The fraud investigation moved the way these things move. Not fast, but steadily. My attorney kept me informed. There were conversations I wasn't party to, documents exchanged, a process that ground along on its own logic. I didn't have to push it. My grandfather had built the account carefully, the attorney had built the contingency carefully, and I had simply shown up when it was time to show up. Elliot and I bought a house with part of the inheritance. Not a showy house, a 1940s craftsman in a neighborhood we'd been priced out of before, with a porch that faces west and catches the evening light. I planted a garden in the backyard which I have no idea how to maintain. But I'm learning. I framed my grandfather's letter, not the legal documents, not the account statement, just his note, the one he updated until the year before he died, the one that said, use it to build something that can't be taken. It hangs in the room that's going to be a nursery eventually, though we haven't told anyone that yet. My grandmother came to visit in October. She sat on the west-facing porch, and we watched the light go orange across the neighbor's maple tree, and she told me stories about my grandfather I'd never heard. How he'd started with nothing. How he'd read everything he could find about compound interest and index funds in the 1970s when that was not common knowledge. How he'd opened that account in 1984 and told her, this one's for the girl. He called you the girl even before you were born, she said. He just knew. I thought about that for a long time after she went to bed. I know how to take up less space in a room. I learned it young, and I'm probably never going to fully unlearn it. But I also know how to recognize the moment when someone who loved you across 30 years and past his own death hands you the match. And I know how to strike it. My grandfather never raised his voice, not once, in all the Sunday dinners I can remember. He'd just watch and wait, and when the time was right, he'd act. Quietly. Permanently. I didn't understand that about him when I was young. I understand it now, because it's exactly what I had to learn to do myself. There's something I've turned over a lot since that afternoon in McLeanan, since I stood up in that tent and said what I said in front of 65 people while my dad held a champagne glass and watched the performance he'd been rehearsing for decades fall apart. What I keep coming back to isn't the money. It's the choice he made 11 days after my wedding. He didn't hesitate. He drove to that bank. He used my social security number. He told a teller I'd sent him. He had the whole thing planned. And what undid him wasn't some dramatic confrontation. It was the simple fact that my grandfather had planned longer and more carefully and with more love. That's the thing about consequences. They don't always arrive loud. Sometimes they've been building in a back office for 40 years, quiet as compound interest, and they just show up one Tuesday when a bank manager turns a folder around and you see a number that changes everything. I think about the version of me who almost didn't go to that bank, who thought, it's probably nothing, he was probably right, why make trouble? I spent so many years telling myself that story, that making myself smaller was the same as keeping the peace, that swallowing things was a form of grace. It wasn't. It was just swallowing. What my grandfather gave me wasn't really the money. It was evidence. Evidence that someone had watched me clearly, from the beginning, and made a decision about my worth that had nothing to do with what my father thought of me. He did it without fanfare. He set it up in 1984, kept it updated, paid an attorney to hold a letter for decades, and trusted that I would eventually show up to claim it. That kind of faith is not small. It took real moral seriousness, the kind that costs something, that requires you to actually act on what you believe instead of just saying it at holidays. It also took intelligence, not cleverness, not manipulation. The kind of clear-eyed thinking that looks at a situation, understands the people in it, and builds something that holds even when those people behave exactly as badly as expected. My grandfather knew my father. He loved him and he knew him and he didn't pretend otherwise. He just built around it. And it took patience. Years and years of patience. That's the part I'm still learning. Elliot has more of it than I do naturally. My grandmother has it in reserves. I can't fathom. I had to borrow theirs until I grew enough of my own. I planted a garden this spring. I don't really know what I'm doing yet. Things come up wrong or don't come up at all, and I have to figure out why, try again, adjust. It's slow and sometimes discouraging and also the most grounded I've felt in years. My grandfather's notes said to build something that can't be taken. I'm working on it.